Yeah.
Perfect.
Hi. Okay, Maya is here. We can now begin. Angie, please take roll.
Chair Wasserman,
Here.
board members Tucker,
Here.
Spring,
Here.
Simidian,
Here.
Esparza.
Here.
Thank you.
We good?
Yes.
Okay, it says report from chair. All I'm going to say is that the county's COVID testing now is up, I believe, at 3,000 a day, which was the state indicator. We're supposed to have an announcement this coming, not this Friday, but next Friday, but whatever can change in the meantime. But the good news is I'm getting confirmation that we've met our indicators. There's 5 or 6 counties, all in the Bay Area, that are not as far ahead as other counties are. And I'm hoping in a week to have some very good news for all of us and all of our constituents. Is Walt on? I don't see him on my screen. Angie, is Walt here?
I don't see him.
Okay, and I'm going to expand my screen to full size, and I've got all 11 of you. Okay, so we'll move on to public comments for any items not on today's agenda. Angie, do we have anybody that's raised their hand?
No, and I don't see any members of the public on our meeting.
Okay, and I guess technically, I'm assuming that no is the answer, but none of you has any members of the public in your home right now wishing to speak?
Let me check. No.
You good, Jerry?
Nope.
Good.
Just me.
Okay, we'll consider public comments taken care of. We now move on to the consent agenda, which as written includes items 1 through 5. Do we have, Angie, any members from the public wishing to speak on any of the consent items? Angie, you there?
Sorry. No, sir.
Nope. Okay, thank you. Members, do any of you wish to add or remove anything from the consent calendar? Otherwise, we can handle it as one vote.
No, that's okay.
Okay, seeing none, do I have a motion regarding the consent agenda?
I'll move.
Motion by member Spring. I need a second.
Second.
Second by member Tucker. Thank you very much. Any discussion?
No.
No. Does anyone wish to vote no against the motion to approve the 5 consent items? Hearing none. Does anyone wish to abstain from voting on the 5 consent items? Hearing none, we will assume that the 5 consent items were passed unanimously. Does that still work for you, Valerie?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you very much. We now move on to item number 6, which is the 5-year review of the Habitat Plan cost fund and development fees. And where's Edmund? There's Edmund.
Right, there I am.
We'll turn it over to you, Edmund.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm going to turn it over to Bob Spencer, who is going to give you a presentation on sort of the rationale behind this request, and also kind of give you a background on why we do this. Bob, please proceed. Bob, you're on mute.
You need to unmute yourself, Bob. And committee members, I want to thank you. We just went from meeting call to order, roll call, report from the chair, public comments, and the consent items. We did it all in 3 minutes. Nice job. Bob, you need to unmute and you're on. Bob, you need to unmute.
There you go.
Almost. There you go. Now you're on. You're on. Now you're off. Nope. Bob, look down maybe the bottom left of your screen.
Yeah,
Angie?
okay. Try
There you
that. All right. I was trying to use my phone, but this will be fine. You can hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay, great. Sorry about that. Do you want to share the screen for a PowerPoint? You have it in your packet. What's easiest?
Committee members, I assume you all have the packet.
It would help me. I don't have it in front of me.
Yeah, it would be easy if you kind of went through your PowerPoint.
Okay, then let's do that. And Angie, can you help Bob as far as sharing the screen?
I think if I push shared screen.
There you
Yes.
Yep.
And none of us did any of this 90 days ago.
I know. Isn't it amazing?
I did.
Oh, Finney did.
Sorry.
There we go. Everybody see that okay?
Yeah, that's
Yes.
perfect.
All right. So the 5-year review, this is done in compliance with the plan, which requires a 5-year look back and adjustment to the costs and funding and development fee schedule. So this is the plan's first 5-year review covering the fiscal years 2014 through 2018. And a key output is to ensure that the fund remains adequately funded. It's known as funding adequacy in Chapter 9 of the plan. And so it's basically a requirement of the permit to demonstrate the plan is fiscally sound. The work involved a cost model update, land acquisition costs, restoration costs, etc. We then updated the funding model, which is essentially a nexus analysis to demonstrate what new development's fair share is and what the fees ought to be and what other revenues are anticipated to be coming in to fully fund the plan and make sure the endowment is fully funded. And out of that, you have a final report in your packet and a revised proposed fee schedule. Let's have people jump in with questions. I don't want to take more time than I need, so I can move this pretty quickly, but feel free to jump in at any time.
Thank you.
Cost model update, we looked at all your actual activities, actual expenditures. We looked at, cost factors for the remaining 45-year period, adjusted those accordingly based on this actual history. We conferred with staff quite a bit on implementation issues, what you're actually facing and how that affects costs. And we produced a new cost model as a result for the 50-year permit term using year 1 to 5 actuals and then projections, estimates for the next 45 years. Here you can see where the plan will be, is anticipated spend monies over this is now the entire 50-year period. Interesting, land acquisition is considered a big part of these plans, but management, monitoring, endowment, those are equally important pieces, wetland restoration, and they show up in the cost model likewise. The plan in fiscal year $18 is now at a total of $830 million. And again, that's over the total 50-year period. On the funding model, we bring in all that cost model data. We look at actual land conversion to date and actual revenues. We update the endowment projections. The endowment is something that was just started with the Silicon Valley Community Foundation, so I can go into that in more detail if you like. We also updated the plan preparation cost recovery numbers, which is that little slice of the fee revenue that goes back to the local partners to pay for the plan preparation costs. We updated the mitigation versus conservation cost shares. That's a key part of the nexus analysis. And out of that comes a new development fee schedule and estimate for other revenue sources that's documented in the final report. On the revenue side, you can see that most of the revenues come from development fees. That's as was anticipated in the original funding model. These percentages actually haven't changed that much from the original funding model. And out of the development fees, most of that is that land cover fee, which is your bread and butter revenue source for the plan. The development fee structure you're familiar with, nitrogen deposition fees, everybody pays. The land cover fee, almost everybody pays, everybody outside of urban areas. And then the special habitat fees based on special habitats you might affect as a project, serpentine, burrowing owl, and wetland. Here's the recommended fiscal year 2021 fee schedule, and this is based on the results of the report, which were done in fiscal year 2018 dollars. And then we used the same annual adjustment that you've been using for the last 5 years. We applied it to the 2 intervening years. So for fiscal year 19 and fiscal year 20, we applied that annual adjustment to come up with the proposed schedule for fiscal year 2021. You can see that for the land cover fee, very modest increase. Those fees have been kept pretty much in line using those annual adjustments every year, that automatic annual adjustment. So there's only a slight increase of about 1 to 2% in that fee. That's comparing it to the current fee schedule, which is a fee schedule that has been frozen in place from fiscal year 18. So really, if you'd applied those annual adjustments, actually the fee would have gone down a little bit. But here we're just making up for the fact that we haven't had any inflation adjustments the last couple of years.
Hey, Bob, it's Wasserman. I've got a question for you, please.
Sure.
For instance, on the final bottom row, burrowing owl, far right column comments, the 5.1%, it says phase in over 5 years. As I recall, that's not phasing in 5.1% over 5 years, like 1% a year. That's actually a 28% increase with an average of about 5.1% per year. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's correct.
Okay, so I would just suggest going forward, and committee members, if you disagree, please tell me. But when I read burrowing owl, increase 5.1, phase in over 5 years, my first impression of that was a 5.1% increase, which will be phased in over 5 years. And really what it is a 5.1% annual increase over each of the next 5 years.
Yeah, that's correct. I wanted to make sure everybody understood that. I appreciate that it doesn't come across clearly in this presentation.
Thank you. The other ones under comments say no phase in. It's just that next year, zone B is going up 2.2%.
Correct.
And I get that. It's just that bottom one. I mean, not that I want to show 28%, but maybe we should show 28% phased in evenly over 5 years, something like that, Bob.
Yeah, if we wanted to update this presentation, I think that's a great point. That increase decrease column, that shows the change for 2021 from the current fee schedule. That's just next year's change.
Right.
And you're right, though, the burrowing owl would be going up 5.1% per year for the next 5 years.
Each of the next 5.
Each of the next 5 years to reach the amount that the funding plan, calculated, that the 5-year report calculated was needed to fully fund that program.
Thank you.
Hey,
And
Bob,
then- yeah.
Bob, this is Renee. For the nitrogen part, it says per single family unit. If it's a multi-family unit, then let's say, I don't know, 4 units, would that then be 4 times that?
No, the fee would be based on the trip generation rate. So the only reason you see a single family unit fee here is because in the agency's fee schedule, it has published a rate for single family units based on the Institute of Transportation Engineers estimated trip rate for single family homes. So that trip rate actually went down from the data from the prior manual used for the original fee. And that's why the single family unit rate is going up less than the vehicle trip rate. But the vehicle trip rate, that's what would be used for a multifamily unit. So that rate would be going up 7% from the, I'm sorry, it would be going up 7% as adjusted by the ITE trip rate manual. And I don't have at my fingertips what changes might have occurred in that manual. I know it did go down for single family unit. It may have gone down for multifamily units as well.
Okay, so the per vehicle trip, that means that would be for multi-family?
It would be multiple. There is a vehicle trip rate that this manual I'm speaking of from ITE, as it's called, Institute of Transportation Engineers, they have several hundred land use categories, including about 5 different multifamily categories. So what most cities do is refer to that manual, find the land use that most closely approximate the project that they're looking at, and use the trip rate from that manual, and they would multiply that trip rate by the size of the project and then by the fee per trip.
Okay, got it. Thank you for translating that to me.
Yeah. I'll move on. These are the wetland increases. So let's talk about burrowing owl and wetlands. These fees are we're phasing them in because the increases are fairly substantial. And we wanted to give the plan and the development community a chance to adjust. You can see that a couple of the fees are being phased in over 5 years. One of them is phased in over 3 years. And one of them is not going up as much. There's no phase in, seasonal wetlands. And for the stream fee, it's actually going down.
And Bob, it's Mike again, and I'm gonna have to interrupt. We're not phasing in riparian 7.1%. We're not phasing in 7.1% over the next 3 years. If comments said anything, it would have to say 7.1% each of the next 5 years.
That's
or
correct.
we change the 7.1% to read like 36 and the 9% to read 45 and put Renee Spring's name next to each of those. I'm kidding you about that, but we can't put these out to the public that says Sycamore alluvial woodlands 9.1% phase in over 5 years. We either got to have the guts to say 45, 50% increase phased in over 5 years, or 9.1% each of the next 5 years.
Yep, I appreciate that. Yeah, I think if we revise this, if we want something, issue something for you know, the public or for a future meeting, I agree.
Okay, and seasonal wetlands would be 5.2% one time only, or only 2021, whatever it is.
There is a detailed fee schedule, I believe that's in your packet as attachment B, if I'm correct, Edmund. I don't have it in front of me.
Yes, let me just confirm that.
And that detailed fee schedule shows each fiscal year what the increase would be, what the fee would be. And of course, this is before the annual adjustment. The annual adjustment that you have to do every year to keep up with inflation would be on top of those increases as well. Although I don't expect that annual adjustment based on what we've seen and what we expect, given the current economic environment, to be in any way significant. It could very well be just about 1% or so a year.
Thank you. And I don't want to give direction without at least committee consensus. But like pond 5.2% phase in over 5 years. I don't know which way you want to go, committee members. We either got to say 26% spread out equally over the next 5 years, or we've got to say 5.2% each of the next 5 years.
I would say each of the next 5 years, I think, or per year. It won't be such a shock.
Yes, you know. I like all of us, I'd rather have a smaller number up there, but we still have to tell the truth and be transparent. And
Yeah.
I would certainly go for 5.2% each of the next 5 years.
Yeah.
Yeah, Chairman.
Yes, please.
It's on page 241 of your packet. It does spell it out the way you have requested, Chairman.
Okay, what does the public see, Edmund?
The public can see, well, the public will see, well, the presentation, who's ever paying attention to the presentation, they would see this. They would also see, if they read the report or they looked at the resolution, they would also see the development fee schedule, which does describe it the way you're showing.
Okay, Edmund, I wouldn't count on a lot of people outside of us watching this Zoom presentation. Could be a lot of Valerie's family members, but aside from that, what I'm wondering about is what developer, what land person, if they went to the Habitat Agency website,
yes,
and they wanted to know what the fees were because they had a lot of freshwater marsh land,
yes,
what would they see?
they would see the increases for next fiscal year, so July 1st, which would be the way Bob is showing it. And then come fiscal year 22, they would see another increase again for the same categories of an equal amount. So
since we're going to be likely approving this, is there something that the public, when they go there, get advanced knowledge that this year it's going up 5% and next year 5% and next year 5% and next year 5%? I want to be very transparent on that.
Yeah, we can post this this particular fee schedule to show people what it's going in and explain to them that it's being phased in over 5 years.
It's
But-
not being phased in over 5 years.
No,
It's-
I meant the schedule that's on page 241. We
Uh-huh.
can make, that will be on the webpage, but it'll be embedded in other documents, but we can call it out specifically and show them that this is how the fees are going up. And
Okay, I would say something like anticipated annual increase for each of the next 5 years.
correct. Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah, we can do that. And we will put it in, we have this area on our webpage is what's new. This is definitely not a friendly what's new. So we can make sure that they see this and understand it.
thank you, thank you. Any committee members disagree at all or have another suggestion?
No, I agree. I think that as transparent as possible is a good way to go. I think also that the reason why should be very clear as well.
Yeah.
So wherever you have that table, make sure it's a good reason why. I mean, was it because I actually don't remember, but was it because of the we did not collect enough the last few years, or we underestimated in the beginning? I've been here since the beginning, so.
Yes, the latter.
The
Yeah.
latter.
Yeah.
Yeah, what happened was, first off, these costs, the wetland restoration costs, are highly variable. And we've seen this across the habitat plans I've worked on in Northern California. So getting a per acre amount to use in a fee schedule is very problematic. So one point is, though, that yes, it seems the initial costs we estimated were low. The other point is the specificity that we tried to have, where we had different costs for each of these land cover types, was too detailed. There's no way we can really, in the end, estimate a willow riparian cost versus Central California sycamore, because there's so much variable within each of those. So part of what you're seeing here is that we're standardizing all of the fees to a single cost per acre for restoration. And that's why some are going up more than others, because some started lower than others. So it's a combination of those two. One, costs are going up then compared to what we estimated in the original plan. And two, we're standardizing that unit cost factor across all the non-stream land cover types.
And Bob, I'll add a couple points. The areas that the land mass, because the land mass keeps shrinking for the burrowing owl fee zone. As the foraging habitat disappears and the birds have declined, there's fewer and fewer properties in which the fee can be captured. So that's one reason why that's going up. Also, we're into tier 3 activities, which is the captive rearing, the intensive management, to try to save the birds from going locally extinct. And for some of those wetland fees, applicant is unlikely to impact the California sycamore alluvial. There's not a lot of it. Freshwater marsh, same deal. There isn't a lot of that habitat type that will be impacted by applicants. So even the fees are going up mainly because it reflects how expensive it is to create and restore that type of habitat. The same with the pond. There shouldn't be a lot of impacts to ponds, but the cost to restore them is a lot more than what was projected back in, about 10 years ago.
Okay, please continue.
Anything else? Shall we move on?
Yes, please.
Okay, so here are some key findings to wrap up. We think staff the agency ought to be encouraging the enrollment of existing open space lands. The plan anticipates over 13,000 acres of existing open space lands will be enrolled as part of the reserve, and none had been enrolled through the first 5-year period. So that's something to keep your eye on. Number two, land dedication in lieu of fees. There's an opportunity, as you know, you've passed a policy to allow that land dedication. So far, $1.5 million in fee credits have been granted to local partners equal to about 223 acres. But no acres have been dedicated through the first 5 years. So again, it's something to watch. Local partners should find a way to meet their land dedication requirements in return for receiving those fee credits. Number three, because of the variabilities we talked about in wetland fees and costs, we think a higher level of scrutiny is required annually to look at the actual cost experience with projects in the prior year and just integrate that if appropriate into the fee schedule. Just pay closer attention. Don't rely on just the annual inflation adjustment for those wetland fees because we're seeing such a wide range there and we don't want the plan to get behind the 8 ball, be underfunded going forward. Burrowing owl fee, again, Edmund mentioned the issues there. So we're also recommending that have somewhat more scrutiny than the annual automatic adjustment every year. Tracking other funding sources. Other funding sources are keeping up at the state and federal level. I think at the local foundation level in the last couple of years, they've been keeping up. The Santa Clara County contributions have not been keeping up, and I would encourage the board and staff to continue working closely with the county so that they can meet their revenue estimates under the plan. The plan had a specific funding estimate to be provided by the county. And that was tied to the fact that the county is off buying open space, has a history of buying open space. So it wasn't considered to be in any way an onerous requirement, simply an extrapolation of the county's level of effort to date.
Thank you, Bob. If I can interrupt, this is Mike. A question to you, Edmund. Is our problem still between the habitat and with the parks? Did we have an initial land dedication that was supposed to go in that hasn't occurred for some reason?
Yes. We're still struggling with getting Calero enrolled. I think we're closer than we've ever been. COVID has definitely slowed that up.
And is the issue been one of being able to still use it versus not using it?
It's been more of the concern with the conservation easement somehow restricting park purposes.
Use.
I don't see it the way park staff does, but they're looking at things from a different lens. I think
okay,
part of it is that
you're working on that with Don?
Yes, and Don's been great. Some of his staff has been challenging, to be blunt, but
Okay.
but Don is focused on trying to get this done.
Good. Yeah, Don is very, very good.
Yeah, and I think we'll get there.
Okay.
They spent a lot of time recently putting together a management plan because they felt that was important to have, and we recently reviewed it. So I think we're getting a lot closer. I'm optimistic. We're also for our Esperanza, just to let you know, we're trying to get the city with the same issue with the regional wastewater facility and portions of that property enrolled for waiving fees related to RWF activities. And again, it's the language of the conservation easement that they're stumbling over. And I don't know where that's going to go. We're earlier in the process, but that's why no public land has been enrolled, existing public land. Also, for the county reps, the 1 million for Tilton goes towards that 5C bullet that Bob brought out. So with the optimistic, I'm very optimistic we'll close on Tilton in September.
Yep.
County will be a partial funder of that. That goes towards 5C.
Wonderful. Thank you. Please continue, Bob.
Okay, the endowment, we didn't get that kicked off quite as quickly as we hoped, getting the Silicon Valley Community Foundation engaged. So we've had to increase the endowment contribution share a bit from the development fees that fund it in order to catch up. And then finally, we've revised the land cost inflation index to something that I think is going to be much more reasonable. It's based on estimates of agricultural land values that are put together by appraisers and land managers from around the state. And we think that's going to be a much better index than one that we had been using that had been tied to housing prices. In fact, by moving to this new land cost inflation index, we're showing 0 land cost inflation over the last couple of years. So that's it for recommendations. And I think that's it for the presentation. Yeah, so I can stop my screen share.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Committee members, we've got 2 recommended actions. Before we get into those, do we have any members of the public waiting to speak on our Zoom committee meeting?
It was great seeing you. You too. I
Angie?
don't see any hands up.
Okay.
And then if I may, anyone on the phone that wishes to speak, you could press *9 and that would indicate for us to let you unmute yourself.
*9. Okay, thank you for that. So now we can have discussion or a motion, and we've got 2 recommended actions before us. It is not either or. Staff is asking for both. Committee members, comments, motions, what would you like to do? All right, you guys, I'll make a motion to accept the 5-year review of the Santa Clara Valley Habitat Plan that we just heard.
For my agenda. Yes, I was going to make the motion. Go ahead. I second it.
Thank you. Motion by Wasserman, then Tucker. Angie, any discussion? Does anyone wish to vote against the motion to accept the review? Does anyone wish to abstain from the motion to accept the review? Hearing neither. Supervisor Simidian, do you have a comment?
No, sir.
Nope. Okay.
Just wanted you to know I was here to acquiesce to your strong leadership, sir.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Yes, yes. Okay, hearing no one wishing to oppose or abstain, we'll consider the motion to accept the review passing unanimously. Now we go on to item 2, which is to adopt by resolution the scheduled development fees that we just discussed. And that would be whoever makes the motion, along with the changes, the direction that we just gave Bob, as far as more clearly defining the phase in. And Bob, as you heard, it was not to take a 25% increase, showing that in the column, but rather to show the 5% increase and then explain that that was to be applicable each of the next 5 years. And Kat's point that on that same page and very close by is the reason why. And again, then Renee's cell phone number.
I'll
Okay,
make a motion to adopt the resolution with those changes.
thank you, Member Tucker.
I'll second that.
That was Member Spring?
Yes.
Thank you. We have Tucker and Spring, Angie, as far as the motion and the second.
Thank you.
Any further discussion? Seeing none and hearing none, does anyone wish to abstain? Hearing none, does anyone wish to vote against? Hearing none, we will consider the motion to have passed unanimously. Thank you all very much for that item.
Thank you, everybody. Have a nice day.
And Bob, thank you for that report. I think it'll be very interesting next time with our next estimate. I would love you to see, I won't be here, but I'm sure many of my compatriots will. The next 5 years when it's up, I think it'd be very interesting to see the first 5-year forecast, what we estimated, and the second 5-year, and how our estimates are doing.
Sure.
I've joked about, a 45, 50-year estimate is silly, but it's a requirement. But I'd also like to see how our estimates are going.
You bet.
There's so many unknowns, 10-year of a boom and then a bust and a COVID and who knows what. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Bob.
Thanks,
That was
Ed.
item 6. We now move on to item 7, Edmund, which will be the Habitat Plan's annual report.
Yes, and this is being presented to you by Jerry Haas, the principal planner. So it's to review and accept the fiscal year 18-19 annual report. Jerry has a short presentation on this.
Thank you. Hello, Jerry.
Hi there. I'm going to try and bring up my PowerPoint.
Angie, in the meantime, do we have any members of the public waiting to speak on this item?
I don't see anyone with their hands up.
Okay, if anybody pops up, will you please remind me at the end of the discussion before we
I will.
final any vote?
Mhm.
Thank you.
Okay. I think I just need to maximize this. Okay. Okay, what does that look like to everyone?
It's a white screen right now, but it might be populating.
No, it doesn't
Nope.
look like what I hoped for. Okay, on share screen, the option, there we go.
There we go.
There you go.
That
Now-
works.
Looks like page 372 in our packet.
Yeah. And is it just the small PowerPoint or do you get the full screen PowerPoint?
We get the full screen. It looks great.
Okay, great. I think we're off to the races then. Sorry for
Committee-
that.
Committee members, can you all see it okay? Yep.
Yeah, okay, and it's
Okay.
not showing the sidebar of the other slides, it's just the whole, it's just the one scene, one,
Full screen.
Yes, you've got the, yep.
okay. I'm using two screens and so it was just confusing. Sorry about that. All right, thank you, Chair Wasserman. And thank you members of the board for virtually being here. I'm here to provide you with an overview of our 5th annual report, which details all the agency activity for the reporting year. In this case, July 2018 through June of 2019. If you have any questions, I'll be happy. There'll be some time after the presentation. I can answer them then. And I'll even try to do them and give you answers accurately. So if you, so it's not changing. Okay, so it's not allowing me, here we go. Now that changed, right?
Yes.
Covered projects to date, we're on that slide. Okay, I think I'm past the snafu here. So this is a chart showing the number of projects covered by the Habitat Plan for each year since plan adoption. The number of projects has been surprisingly consistent over this time and seems to track with the economy on whole. There's no major dips or spikes in activity. For the reporting year, we had 63 covered projects. Cumulatively, the Habitat Plan has provided coverage for 289 projects that resulted in over 2,400 acres of impacts. And I think it's important to note that twice as much developed land or infill development has been impacted as has natural lands. This was a goal of the Habitat Plan, to encourage development of urban and suburban areas and to discourage development of natural landscapes that provide habitat and resources. But unfortunately, there's not much we can do about agricultural conversion. It still seems to be one of the preferred options by development, usually because it's flat, open land. Here is a representative project that was covered in the reporting year. Many projects, as you all probably know, are small, sometimes only paying nitrogen deposition fees, and others can be quite large, you know, in the range of hundreds of thousands of dollars. This is a residential subdivision in Gilroy that developed 16 acres of agricultural land on the valley floor. And we're still looking okay for slides there.
There you go.
Okay. Development of the reserve system, specifically 46,000 acres within 50 years, is required by our permits. This means we should be enrolling a little over 900 acres per year. We jumped ahead in the beginning with enrollment of Coyote Ridge Open Space Preserve, but it's been a long and challenging legacy of attempted land acquisition since that time. Although no new land was enrolled during the reporting year, we have been very busy working with property owners in key locations across the county and the plan area. So I am happy to report that 5 new properties were actually purchased by the Habitat Agency between the end of the reporting year and the beginning of this calendar year. I'm just going to kind of point out a few of them where they are, these 5. Tulare Hill is number 3 on this image, and that's a 36-acre piece of property with annual grassland and serpentine soils on Coyote Valley. Baird Ranch, you'll see that as number 7 on this exhibit. That's 600 acres, high value habitat, serpentine grassland, several covered plant species, and one of only 3 known occurrences of Coyote ceanothus. Davidson property is number 8 on this figure. And that's 80 acres of annual grassland and serpentine soils adjoining Baird Ranch. Uvas South, you'll see down here is number 10 on this figure. That's 347 acres, extending uphill and to the west of Uvas Dam. This is in the Santa Cruz mountain foothills. And finally, Soralo, which is number 13. This property is 103 acres and includes 1 mile of Pacheco Creek immediately upstream of our existing Pacheco Creek Reserve. Okay. Speaking of Pacheco Creek Reserve, I thought it would be worthwhile to talk briefly about what we do with properties that become part of our reserve system. And this is a good example. We're going to focus on 3 R's here. And sorry, but none of them are rest and relaxation. This property has provided us with opportunities to restore habitat that will benefit many of our covered species. That's because the property is covered with good habitat to begin with. It was just mismanaged for decades. This was the site of a former gravel mining operation. After the mining stopped, years of neglect and overgrazing sprinkled with wildfire and flood events really took a toll on the landscape. So in 2017, we completed a riparian restoration project above the north bank of Pacheco Creek. And it's intended to replace some of the habitat that was, one, disconnected from the channelized creek and suffering from a change in water availability, and 2, was overgrazed for years, which has prevented a lot of the late succession trees and shrubs from taking root. We're also preparing a feasibility study for I guess we'd call it a more robust stream restoration project to reestablish a connection to the historic floodplain on this property. This will increase the habitat footprint and retain more water on site. The Pacheco Creek Restoration Project will be constructed, we believe it will start in the fall of 2021. The second R here is research. We've conducted, and this is again on Pacheco Creek Reserve, we've conducted a sycamore genetic study on this property that is instrumental in establishing an understanding of the hybridization of that species across the plant area. Just last year, we completed a wildlife permeability study to assess wildlife movement across and under State Route 152, Pacheco Pass. In just that 1 year, we recorded over 3,000 individual animals moving through box culverts and under bridges in just a few mile stretch of Pacheco Pass. So that's the image there in the middle. You'll see a couple of partners, a bobcat and a badger, using one of our undercrossings there. So we were able to document higher roadkill mortality during rain events when culverts and bridges are flooded. And this has led to the forthcoming improvements to bridges and undercrossings at the reserve that will reduce the number of animals being killed and also reduce traffic collisions in the area. The final R is relationships. We have good working relationships with ranchers on both ends of this property. And we've already purchased a 100-acre property immediately upstream, the Soralo property that I mentioned earlier. And we have negotiated plans to purchase land or conservation easements from other neighboring properties. We have the names and phone numbers of several of our neighbors, and we call each other when there are issues that affect one or more of us, and we help each other out there.
Nice.
Most importantly, though, I think our mission, our purpose, and who we are is now being understood by a remote and rural community who might not ever have heard of us before. So with each new land transaction, whether it's a fee title or a conservation easement, the role of the agency and the benefits of having us as neighbors becomes more clear. As I mentioned earlier, we're a little behind in land acquisition through the reporting year, and that's reflected in this slide. But during next year's presentation, what you're going to see is a movement of all the habitat and species in that red column over to the green column. And we all know the green's the better color of the two. So we'll move into compliance for most of these because all those 5 properties that I mentioned earlier that we purchased just after the end of the reporting year had one or more of these habitat types present on the property. And the only exception is the burrowing owl habitat for proportionality. We're having a struggle finding, as Ed mentioned earlier, let alone buying burrowing owl nesting habitat, and it's increasingly difficult to keep up with the pace of impacts to that species. Cumulatively, the habitat plan is funding so far is nearly $55 million. And make sure that this comes on here. Fee funding totals nearly 3 million and non-fee funding about 25 million. Non-fee funding accounts for mitigation only, voluntary contributions paid to the Habitat Agency, also includes grants to the Habitat Agency and its partners, and land acquired by others for the reserve system. So this year, the Habitat Agency received over $3.8 million in direct fees and $8 million in grants. You'll notice that our expenses ticked up a little bit in the reporting year compared to the 2 prior years. And this was largely due to the construction of our biggest restoration project to date, the San Felipe Creek Restoration Project in Grant County Park. It was a big one. So are we on track? As of the end of the reporting year, we are 12% of the way through our 50-year permit term. As you can see, we're very close to the estimates for permanent and temporary impacts anticipated by the plan. We're a little light in conservation, but as I mentioned earlier, the purchase of those 5 properties just after the end of the reporting year, followed by 2 more sizable purchases that we're going to have in the next few months, means that we're very soon going to be pretty far ahead in compliance for conservation. This was brought up earlier too, but we still haven't enrolled county parks land into conservation easements, so that 1, 2, 3, 4th column there, existing open space enrollment, that will remain low until that happens, until we get some properties enrolled. And that counts for city properties too. City of San Jose has got some property that they have wrapped up in credits for land. The final 2 columns demonstrate that we're currently not on target to generate all the funding envisioned by the plan through the 50-year permit term, but that's probably going to change with the fee adjustment that you just approved. We've also had a couple of low years of fee funding, which is one thing, but also the lack of enrollment of any land by our co-committees means that we have, as was mentioned by Bob earlier, $1.5 million that's unrealized in the budget. That money is tied up in credits that are valid, but they just have yet to be paid in real cash or land. So a couple of good fee years and the dedication of some county park land or property of the city of San Jose will change this scenario rather quickly. And yeah, I wanted to keep it brief. So that's the fiscal year annual report in a nutshell. And
Thank you, Jerry.
yeah, happy to answer any questions.
Appreciate that. And Angie, we still don't have any members from the public. Is that correct?
Correct, sir.
Okay, thank you very much. Committee members, any comments or questions you've got before we entertain a motion?
Nope.
Seeing none, does anyone wish to make a motion? The action being requested by staff is, it's in my agenda, it says review adjustments, excuse me, review and accept, there we go, the Habitat Plan's annual report. That's what I'm looking for, or some modification.
Make a motion to accept the report as is.
Thank you very much. We have a motion by Tucker,
I'll second that.
second by Spring. Any further discussion? Seeing none, does anyone wish to oppose the motion of acceptance? Hearing none, does anyone wish to abstain from voting on the motion? Hearing none, the motion will be considered to have passed unanimously. That was item number 7. Thank you very much, Jerry.
Thanks, Jerry.
Yep.
We now move on to item 8, which is our operating budget.
Yes, thank you, Chairman Wasserman. This is just to review adjustments to the operating budget for fiscal year 2021, which was approved last June by the governing board. So just wanted to give you basically an update on where we're at, and also to discuss changes that we made in this budget. So currently the Habitat Agency has roughly 2.2 million in our JP Morgan Chase general operation account and 11.3 million in change in our local government investment fund reserve account. So financially, at least for now, we have about 13.5 million in various accounts, plus the monies that are invested in the endowment account, which I'll talk a little bit during my EO report. In addition, the Habitat Agency has leveraged over 31 million in still to be spent grant awards, covering conservation strategy implementation, costs associated with fencing, habitat restoration, research, and land acquisition. The good news on the big acquisitions that are coming up with Tilton and another big chunk of the UTC holdings is that we're spending very little of our money. And that's where a lot of that 31 million will be invested. Don't need to tell you what's been going on. 13-hour board meetings for Chair Wasserman. And I'm sure a lot of it's related to COVID. And we've done a lot of soul searching here at the agency and discussing how this is going to affect us, not just this year, but over the next 3 to 4 years. So due to the recent events and the tripling of the reserve system, I'm thinking about the acquisitions that will be happening next fiscal year. The Habitat Agency is apprising the governing board of fiscal year 21 budgetary changes. This budget reflects a reallocation of priorities from management, planning, and restoration to land management and infrastructure improvements. So infrastructure improvements for us is fence repairs, new fences, roads, and so forth. Table 1 shows how some of that readjustment is happening in what we call conservation strategy implementation, or category 3 that is in the budget. And as you look through the categories, you can see where we have shifted money from 3.1 and 3.3 into 3.5 and 3.2. And Julie King, our most recent hire, reflects this change in strategy, and we'll be adding another person shortly who will be focused solely on land management, scientific research, monitoring, and general oversight of our properties and the partners in the case of OSA, who manage some of our sites for us. And you can see with the changes, we're saving almost 6 million in this category, or I wish it was 6 million, 600,000 in this category. At our June 27th meeting last year, we thought, well, there's a correction on this page. So this is correction on page 382. That 6,044,000 number is incorrect. It should be, we were projecting revenues to be 4,075,000 for this past fiscal year, or for next fiscal year, excuse me, for fiscal year 21. So I have the wrong number in there. It should be, we were assuming revenues would be a little over 4 million for the upcoming fiscal year.
Edmund, I'm sorry, Edmund, it's Mike. I'm looking on page 382 right now.
Yeah.
And I don't see a $6 million number.
It's
In the
380.
paragraph.
Yeah, it's right underneath the table. So where the table
Oh
ends.
yeah, 6,044,000.
Yeah.
And that number should be what?
4,075,000.
I make the same kind of mistake in my checkbook. All right, thank you.
You're welcome. And so, and we also thought grant revenues would be a little over 3.5 million for next fiscal year. Our revised projections for fiscal year 21 are that we anticipate approximately 2 million in mitigation fees. So basically having it, and 16 million in grant and funding and other funding allocation revenue, like interests on in our LAIF account, and cost share agreements we have with partners. So that's telling a very different story than back in 2019. So the good news is we've been very successful in securing grant funding from local partners as well as state and federal partners. And that 16 million reflects the monies that'll be spent from our conservation partners at various levels of government in acquiring land and helping to pay for some of our restoration projects.
I have a question.
Yes.
Please, Scott.
So in the beginning, you talked about the COVID-19. what I'm not clear on is the work that needs to be done out on the land. Under land management, you have reduced it quite a bit, the money, from 65,000 to 17,000. Is that due to I don't understand why you can't still go out and check the land as a single person going out there. How is that any different than hiking by yourself?
Yeah, so, so category 3.5, land management activities, we're increasing that by 165,000 for next fiscal year. And that's related to capital improvements to the properties, like putting in fences, repairing gates. There were several of the properties we acquired, the gates were either broken or didn't function correctly. It's also related to some equipment purchases and some baseline surveys that have to be done related to rare plants and the butterfly. So the land management activities at 3.5 are increasing. And so that's why the expense. And also we now have staff that are dedicated to overseeing management of those properties, where in the past we had not.
Okay, you didn't have people in the past.
Right, yeah. And that's where the allocated costs, that reflects staff increases. So that's why you see that nearly $25,000 increase.
But it wasn't because everyone's sheltering in place. You were
No. Actually, Julie and Jerry have still been going out in the field a lot. Jerry's been kind of pinch hitting to do management on some of the properties. When Tara left, we had a period of time where we didn't have enough staff to do things. With the adding of all these, doubling of the reserve system this year, another doubling of it next year, we had to pivot to spending more on land management. Some of these things are one-time costs, but some of them are fixed.
Thank you, Jerry and Julie.
Yeah.
Thanks, Jerry. Okay, I get it. Thank you.
And so overall, we're saving $718,735 in next year's budget. And this represents a 14.9 reduction in our proposed fiscal year 21 budget expenses that we presented to you all last June. So the reason this has gone down is COVID. We're thinking, okay, fee revenues are going to be less. Also reallocating costs instead of just an additive on like business as usual, and let's just increase expenses. We said, how can we save money? How can we move money around? And so we came up with, there's areas that we can't cut, and there's areas that we're now taking on more responsibilities, but we didn't want to increase the budget. Thought it was important to look how we do our business and how we can reallocate priorities and focus on different ways we're spending our money. So that's what we did internally. The fiscal year 23 budget, I know I'm skipping ahead here, will be very different if revenue projections remain bleak than the budget being discussed today. So sizable outlays embedded in the fiscal year 21 budget and projected for fiscal year 22. A lot of those reflect one-time expenses associated with new fences and gates, finishing up 2 habitat restoration projects that have grant funding associated with them to help pay for them, but we're still a major contributor. Database development and the establishment of the in lieu fee program with the regional general permit with the Corps. So these costs will not carry over into fiscal year 23. And if revenues do not rebound in the coming years, we will not be implementing these kind of projects pending an uptick in economic activity. So this took everybody by surprise, and we have things in the hopper, things that have to be done, things that we've already made major investments with on design and permitting, grants we've secured for some of these projects, so we can't walk away from those easily. We have enough money in the bank to pay for those, but then if things are still looking terrible, we're going to kind of just circle the wagons and just do what we have to do in terms of managing the land and doing what's absolutely required by the plan and cutting back on big ticket projects, including land acquisition.
Understood.
Just wrapping it up, the Habitat Agency tentatively projects estimated revenues for fiscal year 21 will be approximately 2 million, which is less than half what we were projecting, and approximately 16 million in grant and funding allocation revenue. Expenses are anticipated to be 4,101,000 versus the over 4.8 million that was projected last June, a savings of $718,735. And that's all I have to report on this. Thank you.
Thank you, Edmund. And committee members, this was a review of the operating budget, which we just had. Valerie, it says recommended action is review. We don't need a motion to review or accept, to my knowledge. Is that correct? Thank you. You're muted, but I could read those lips. Okay.
Correct.
Good enough. Angie, do we have any members of the public wishing to speak on item number 8?
No, sir.
No. Any committee members with any comments or questions? We don't need a motion, so if there's nothing more, we're going to move on to 9. Anything you want to be asked of Edmund?
No, thank you, Edmund.
You're welcome.
Thank you, and all the supporting staff too. A great job. We
Thank
now
you.
move on to number 9. Edmund, we're back to you as a report from the executive officer.
Yes, and I'm adding some additional information that just kind of came in. So you have your notes there, and there's a few things that I will add some additional narrative. So you have in your notes the fiscal year 2020 budget update.
Yep.
So that's this fiscal year, and I can share this if that's easier for people.
I think that would be best.
Okay. Let's see, where do I go here?
And while you're bringing it up, Edmund,
Yeah.
you're sharing what?
This is my executive notes.
Beyond what we have in our agenda?
No, a little bit, yeah.
Okay. And Angie, do we have anybody wishing to speak on this item?
No, sir.
Thank you.
Yeah, it didn't let me share it. That's strange.
That's okay. We've got that. I'm with you.
I see them
Okay.
up.
Yep, it's up.
Okay. Okay, you see them, I don't. I can see why Jerry got confused.
Yeah. Looks
Yeah.
like
Yeah,
a
see,
picture of you
I have
maybe.
two, I'm in the office today, so I got 2 screens here, and I now see what Jerry was experiencing.
Yeah, 2
And-
screens is too much for one mind.
Yeah, it's like, what happened? Okay, it's over on the other screen. So,
And Edmund, I think what you put up is your grocery list.
oh, did I put up my grocery list?
You might want to look for, no, I'm kidding you. Okay, we're there.
Hopefully nothing embarrassing.
It's a lot of Tylenol. Okay.
Yeah, that ibuprofen, you know.
There you go.
It's also a malaria medicine on there.
Yes. That's what I told. Yeah, I'm thinking banana split. Okay, go ahead.
Yeah. So this shows our budget for this fiscal year, and what we projected last June is the first column or second column. Spent to date is the third column. Remaining is the fourth column. What we anticipate to still be spent between now and the end of the middle of June when invoices come in, and anticipated balance. So we expect that we will not spend the full 4,061,000, that we will actually spend 688,211 less than what we projected. We will, in September at the joint meeting, we will have this locked down and be able to give you an exact outcome of the fiscal year.
Edmund, if I may, on that fifth row where it says total, I see the second column. We projected 4,061,000. We spent 2.8 million of that, so we've got 1.1, which is the 4 million minus the 2.8. I get that. You've got commitments of 711,000 versus the 1.1 million we have. So why isn't your anticipated balance 400,000 rather than 688?
Oh, I don't know. I didn't put this together, so I should have reviewed it more closely, Chairman. But yes, you are correct. Okay, let me
look just for a minute. Administration 594 leaves 107, committed 107, so it'd be 0. 372 minus 303 is 68. We've committed 42. I think the second row is wrong as well. That should be closer to 26. Conservation strategy 2.9 versus 1.9 is 900. Spend 550. I think conservation strategy should probably be closer to 430 as well.
Correct.
Water permitting 190 minus 170 is 20. Going to spend 12. Water permitting is correct. Administration is correct. But that's why your total's off, because the two in the middle are not.
Correct. Yes, I see that now that you're bringing that up.
Okay.
I should have reviewed this more carefully.
Okay, but it looks like we're going to have a 400,000, 470 at least, rather than 688. Okay, thank you.
And then projected revenues, we're anticipating them to be basically 2,750,000, and that's down from the projection of 6,044,000. Now with an endowment investment, I looked today at what the balance was in the Silicon Valley Community Foundation Social Responsibility Fund. And to date, we've invested almost 2.9 million. And the balance as of today, or I should say as of yesterday, was nearly 3 million. So the stock market hasn't done that much today. So that balance will probably be close, similar at the end of today as what it was at the end of yesterday. We lifted the suspension on further contributions to this fund on May 25th, 2020. We were a little conservative, not sure what was going on with the markets, but after discussions with Silicon Valley Community Foundation investment staff, we decided to, given this is a 44 years left before permit sunsets, it's a long-term investment, we started contributing monies to this fund again. So just a little bit on advocacy update. I won't get into this too much. There's stuff that you can read in more detail, but basically the California Habitat Conservation Coalition has been focusing on a couple bills at the state level, mainly Garcia and Allen. And both of them have come out of their respective committees, and they still may end up being passed by the full Assembly and the full Senate. And in both of those bills, there's monies that would be earmarked for NCCPs. The new information I have is with the federal. This is hot off the wire. Yesterday, the Senate passed the Great American Outdoors Act. You may ask, well, how is this significant? Well, the Land and Conservation Fund, the monies that in the past, the Land and Conservation Fund, which is funded by oil and gas revenues on federal land, every year, even though that money was in a fund, you had to go, Congress would go through an appropriations process. And the Section 6 monies came out of this Land and Conservation Fund appropriation process. You will not have to do that anymore. This will become part of the general federal budget that will be earmarked, and you will not go through the appropriations process.
Wonderful.
Yes, and this is something that the National HCB Coalition has been pushing for years. So it's going to go to the House next. The House will pass this. There was bipartisan support in the Senate. President Trump said he would sign it. So that's very encouraging. Jerry kind of talked about the Davison property already. It's 93.9 acres. It's in Morgan Hill. It has the rest of that Coyote Ceanothus occurrence that's on the Baird property. It's 95% serpentine. It's relatively untouched. It was a great acquisition by the agency. Funding came from Valley Water and PG&E.
Awesome.
Tilton Ranch, that's the big kahuna. We're hoping to close on that in September. We are going to close on East Coyote Ridge. That's over 1,500 acres. We will, looks like close of escrow will be July 20th. Wildlife Conservation Board was the final hurdle we had to get over, and they approved allocating money towards it. Calero Park, spoke about that already. It's kind of a saga with Castle and Cook, but this is one of the last remaining pieces I think they hold on Coyote Ridge, and they have approached us. They want to sell it. We're awaiting a purchase and sale agreement from them. Once that happens, we will purchase it for $125,000. There's 2 other properties, including the Malek property, which was, we're applying for grant funding to help acquire that we're in discussions with landowners with. We've got willing sellers. Hopefully we'll get grant funding to proceed with both acquisitions. And that's all I have to report. Thank you.
Wonderful, thank you. And this is to receive, so again, we don't need a motion. Angie, anybody from the public? No.
No, sir.
Committee members, any further questions for our executive director?
Nope.
Nope, I'm seeing no hands raising, nothing. Okay. Edmund, we'll consider that report received. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Almost done here. Future governing board initiated agenda items. Any committee members wish to suggest anything for future agenda items? Seeing none, we'll always have a placeholder for that. Our upcoming meetings, our governing board meeting will not be until September 17th, which you should all have on your calendar already from our original calendar. And those of you that also serve on the implementation board. Angie, what?
That was Joe.
This is Joe.
Oh, I'm sorry. Joe, did you have a comment?
Hang on. No, I just wanted to say I have to check out a minute early here, so I apologize, Supervisor. Thank you very much.
No problem. Remember, white wine with
Mike, you're muted for some reason.
Yep. There you go.
There you go. All right. Thank you very much. I was just telling Joe to remember white wine with fish. Okay. So governing board, we will reconvene September 17th, but those of you that hold dual status, July 16th is currently an implementation board meeting, which will be up to Member Lizotte whether or not, and Edmund, whether or not you're holding that meeting in July.
Yes.
I think that's it. Any other comments? If not, we will consider this meeting adjourned at 4:16. Angie, does that work for you?
That works. Thank you.
All right, Valerie, anything else that we should know?
The only question I have is, Mr. Chair, is whenever it's allowed, one of those future meetings, if will be noticed whenever we are doing it in person again.
Yes.
Give us a notice ahead of time is what I'm trying to say. Give me advance. Of course.
Yeah.
I don't know when that will be, Mr. County Supervisor, but
Well,
once it is.
hey, I suggested everybody, they had offices that took polls on when they would be back, and they said January 1st. My pick was August, just because most of us don't have committee meetings in July.
Right, right.
We need a vaccine to come. What we do have to be careful of, for instance, there was a highlight that just came across my screen where it said California reported a big jump in cases. And what they don't tell you, for instance, in Santa Clara County, 3 or 4 weeks ago, we were averaging 1,000 tests a day. A week ago, we were averaging 2,000 tests a day. Over the last 7 days, we're averaging 3,000 tests a day. So in each instance, the positivity rate was between 0.9 and 1.1%. So call it 1%. So if you test 1,000 people a day, 1%, you get 10. If you test 2,000, you get 20. If you test 3,000, you get 30. That's what we're doing. But the press, to make it more sensational, reports that our positive tests tripled. Okay? Because they went from 10 to 30. Well, the reason they went from 10 to 30 is because we went from 1,000 to 3,000 tests a day, which we've now done for the last 7 days, which meets the state's indicator, but they want us to do it for 14 days. So we have 46 testing sites. People are showing up. Morgan Hill and Gilroy were great last weekend. San Jose was super last week. My staff worked 2 days at 2 testing sites in South County last week. They were there for 8 hours a day as people pulled up in cars and did the swabbing and the testing and back and forth, because they're all working, they're all getting paid, and they wanted to help do that as community service. On the tracing team, we had 3,000 people volunteer to be on the county tracing team, and over 1,000 of them completed the necessary paperwork and are now doing the training so they can be on the tracing team. We now have a tracing team large enough to handle our positive cases, so we meet that indicator.
Oh, good.
So right now we've got 4 out of 5 of the state PHO's indicators, and Kat and I have been through this ad nauseum, but for the rest of you, we've got 4 out of 5. The 5th one was an average number of tests per day, which we are now at and we expect to maintain. The only negative thing we have going on is the increased number of cases in the hospital. However, we have 54 people in the hospital and 2,000 empty beds.
Right.
Okay, so yes, we've gone up from 50 to 54 people, but by no means are we in danger of overwhelming our hospital system. We have 750 of our 800 ventilators not being used.
Right.
What else? Oh, 44% of the 152 people that have died in Santa Clara County, 44% were senior citizens with pre-existing conditions in assisted nursing facilities.
Right.
Okay? Just because you're old like me and you had asthma and everything else, that's not in a nursing facility. You're in there, unfortunately, because you have something that needs around-the-clock care.
Right.
And that's unfortunate. But that's where the real situation is on this. The last thing the PHO has said, and she said this 2 weeks ago, was that her next announcement would be on the 26th, which is next Friday. I'm still hoping, but I'm afraid I'm going to be wrong on this one. I'm still hoping there's an announcement before that that says the evidence that we have from the tests that we've run are fine, and the next order can come out sooner, moving us well into expanded stage 2, which should include things such as personal services, barbers, yoga, gymnasiums, stylists, estheticians, all the stuff they're doing in Alameda, San Benito, Santa Cruz, and San Mateo counties.
Yeah.
52 of the 58 counties are ahead of us. the 5 that are with us are all in the Bay Area. If you go to the state's website, CADPH, California Department of Public Health, you can put in your county or just look at the state map, and you will see that 53 of the 58 they're in stage 2 and moving along. 5 counties are not, and all 5 of us are next to each other right here in the Bay Area. And yet there are counties here in the Bay Area, and I just named them, where you can go for a haircut. On the other hand, what we have not seen, and the PHO is concerned about, and I hope she's wrong, but I don't think she will be wrong, is all the human chains from all the demonstrations that took place the last 2 weeks all around the country. We had 2 demonstrations in downtown Los Gatos on Wednesday and Friday of over 500 people each.
Right.
And about a third were not in masks, and 2/3 were. And people were yelling and screaming and the right to assemble and First Amendment rights and all the stuff that we got going on. But they were locked together arm in arm and didn't have masks on. So it takes about 2 weeks for those things to present themselves. And I'll close with this. My daughter, who I love very much, she says to me, she's a hairstylist. She says, she sends me a YouTube video. She goes, really? They get to do that? And I can't have a mask on and treat one client every half hour? And I said, Nicole, the Constitution protects right to assemble and freedom of speech, and it does not address hairstylists.
No, I know.
Anybody else, anything else you want to share?
No, thank you.
Like you said, you can get a haircut in Santa Cruz County, and I'm clearly not using hairstylists in Santa Cruz County, so plenty of help out there if you need it.
Thank you. My daughter's getting free rent for doing this in my kitchen.
All right. Nice to see you all.
It is weird. You can get your teeth cleaned, but not that I need my haircut, but you could. It doesn't make sense, right? You can get your eyes checked, and they can't be any closer than anyone else.
My wife was at the dentist yesterday, Renee, and what's really ticking me off, is our budget now in the last 3 weeks has grown from 100 million deficit to 200 million to now 400 to 600 million. And at the same time, I hear people leaving Santa Clara County to go get their hair and nails done and eat at a restaurant.
Yep.
And they're spending their dollars there, and those are sales tax dollars. And we're going to have to cut services here because our residents have to go to other counties to get a haircut.
Right.
So we need to get this straightened out. But right now, the state PHO says we have not met our indicator of number of tests per day, although we're halfway there now. And both the state and our county PHO has expressed a concern about the rise in hospital beds that I've suggested, okay, but if we're at 5% of hospital beds and we double to 10, isn't that much better than another county that's already at 50% of hospital beds and goes to 55? So we're almost there, but it's getting dire.
Yeah.
Yep. Anything else? Anybody else?
Keep
No?
it up. Stay strong.
Thank you.
All
Thank
right.
you all very much.
Thank you.
No,
Bye.
Thank you.
Stay well, everybody. Stay well.
Wave.
thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Gee.